Hi, I'm Alistair Shipley. Driven by the beliefs that everyone has something special to offer, I created Not So Average, the podcast that proves that you don't need to be in the top 1% to be truly extraordinary. Each episode spotlights everyday people from your community, the very individuals you might pass on the street. These relatable stories reveal that whether you're a jack of all trades or a niche specialist, we all have unique experiences and valuable lessons to share. Imagine if we all took a moment to realize we're all not so average. Let's get after it. Welcome to the very first episode, number 1, Not So Average, the podcast. Today, I have my close friend, Evan Luft, as the inaugural first interview, taking a real gamble on this. Who knows where this goes?
I'm excited, man.
Please.
This is the first podcast, and somehow I was chosen to be the guinea pig.
This is amazing. He's often been on the other side of interviewing people, but as you'll find out a little bit later on, it's fun to have him on with me as my first guest. For those who don't know, this is Evan Luft. I'm Alistair Shipley. Evan Luft is a fantastic guitarist, probably one of the best I've ever heard live. And I'm not just pumping his tires because he's going to be on my first podcast here. He's a complete hockey wrangler. As a Canadian, I'm embarrassed to say I don't have a tenth of the skills that this guy does on the ice.
You do. You've learned more in 1 year than I learned in 2 years.
Oh my gosh. Also a world explorer, social personality, and something that I'm most proud of, he is a great friend. I'm willing to say that to you straight to your face. And having known you for, I think we calculated it's about 11 years, right? We went to university together. Evan and I have been to nearly, I think, what would you say, around 10 countries or so?
Yeah, we did a lot of traveling. This guy is so well traveled, hence why he started the podcast, and he's been like an inspiration to me, especially like when it comes to figuring out what to do with my life and business things. But you and I have done a fair bit of traveling together, which has been super fun.
We can wrap the podcast up right there. I got the warm and fuzzies. That's what we're here for. I can just leave it right now. But I was going to say, Evan and I have traveled extensively with our group of friends, with just ourselves. And he is one of the guys that I've gotten to know the best over my life, basically, from traveling. Evan, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for having me on, Alistair. This is so exciting. And for those of you who haven't seen this is the podcast. If you haven't seen it on the banner, the YouTube banner or the logo, you drew this with chalk. So that just is going to live right here. But for those of you that couldn't see it in the distance there, right next to the little plant we got growing here.
So Evan is obviously quite the personality. He is also a personality online in a very niche area of YouTube. You can find him at Evan Luft.
Yeah, Evan Luft. People know me as the pilot that flies around, documents my life.
We'll be sure to put that in the show notes, but Evan's got a lot of things that we're going to dive into, and I'm just going to hit him with the first question to get this going. And basically, what was the first thing that inspired you to pursue a career in aviation, and was it always a dream, or did it just spark?
The thing that started me, that's a great question, because I ask pilots this all the time, what got them into aviation, and it seems to be a common thing, is that someone in their family had introduced them to the world of flying. For me, it was just a fascination with airplanes. I did a little bit of time where I'd go to the airport. My dad brought me to the airport, and we'd watch the little airplanes land and take off, and that seemed pretty cool. I was 14 at the time.
Wow.
And my other inspiration was my dad had all of his old flying books. Now, my dad started flight training, but he never actually finished it because he was working. And he had these old flight training manuals. So I thought, this would be fun to read. And obviously, when you're young, you don't really think about the future so much. You just want to do things that are fun.
Yep.
And that seemed fun to me. And also, Microsoft Flight Simulator. That was like when, for those of you who don't know, it's like an online flight simming kind of game, which this was back in 2004, so it was a fairly new thing, and computers weren't that great back then.
Talking PCs at your desktop.
Yeah. And so I would play on that a little bit, and I became very interested in airplanes. So I started taking flying lessons, which were really inexpensive at the time. And then fast forward to now, just love for airplanes, the mechanics, and flying is really just a small part of that. The flying part is obviously a great perk, but I just love airplanes. And people that are in aviation usually can relate to that the flying is actually a small part of what they love about being a pilot.
Yeah. For those who have ever experienced having a conversation with a group of pilots, you immediately feel just their innate love for everything to do with planes. It's hilarious traveling with this guy. We ran into pilots in Slovenia. I remember talking with this guy that was well connected with a stunt pilot here in Canada that you guys were aware of. I don't know if you remember that. We were in Ljubljana.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, that was hilarious. But I guess for kind of the next question, was there a specific moment that you realized that being a pilot was potentially more than a career for you?
No, I think nobody really knows what they want to do with their lives. When we make good decisions, we make bad decisions. And pilots are no different. Maybe they make more bad decisions than good decisions.
Hopefully not, because
hopefully not when they're flying.
Yeah.
But I think you probably relate to this because you've done so many business ventures and stuff. And sometimes, like, you surprise me and you say, "Whoa, I don't really know what the next thing is now." And I think, I don't know, you had 2 other good things going 2 years ago, but you're always thinking ahead, right? So for us pilots, or for me, anyways, as a pilot, I always had these grand ideas that I'd like to fly a specific type of airplane that I really love.
What was the one that you had your eyes fixed
I don't know.
on?
I didn't know what that was yet. It was
Okay.
always the fastest, the biggest airplanes, all this kind of stuff. And that's evolved into a passion just for being able to fly anything. So every airplane has its own unique characteristics that make it fun to be involved in flying, and the evolution of a pilot is usually to fly really cool, awesome airplanes. And once you've done all that, the best thing that any pilot can do is go back and fly the tiny little small airplanes that they either learn to fly on, because that ends up being like the full circle of a pilot. And eventually you just love the community of people. Like I said, the mechanics is a big part of it, and it's flying isn't cheap. It's an expensive thing to do, and it's reflected in ticket prices and all that stuff, and airlines don't make a lot of money, but it's because people just love to do it. So a lot of hobby aviation enthusiasts spend a lot of time and money just to be involved in the community, and people will buy sometimes airplanes just for the sake of being able to be involved in the flying clubs and partake in just the adventure of aviation. Go flying to the simplest things. Yeah, I always say the best reason to go flying is no reason at all.
I like that. I do like that.
Another great saying is the best way to make $100 million in aviation is to start with $1 billion.
So that's the cost of getting all your flight lessons and maintenance on a plane.
You have to really love to do it, yeah.
That's incredible. Okay, so changing gears just a little bit, but what did you find was your biggest challenge you faced when you were becoming a pilot? Was it the expense of it all, or was there something else about getting started?
The biggest challenge, I think, with flying was you're always surrounded by people who are better than you, and you're always influenced. They say, like, the best way to know someone is a pilot is they'll tell you they're a pilot. So that's like it's a kind of a fighting ego in the aviation world, is that you're always surrounded by people who are better than you, and there's always someone else that's flown or has more experience, and you never stop really learning about aviation. It's very easily to be sobered pretty fast or to be humbled very quickly. So the hardest part in aviation for me was always having to be confronted by different opinions on what might be done safer, different personalities, because the aviation world is very regulated. So you're constantly having to deal with just different personalities in a world where everything is very controlled and very, very regulated. So the hardest part, I think, for me has always been just having to deal with different personalities, different types of people in general. Like, the flying is really not as complicated as people make it out to be.
Okay.
It's the hardest part of, I think, being a pilot is really just handling different types of personalities and people and stuff. That's what I've found to be the most challenging.
People you work with, and also who you could be flying.
Yeah, and that boils down to just finding, when you first get your licenses, the first part of that is trying to find a job. And sometimes it comes down to the exact same thing that you would know. It's not necessarily about what qualifications you have, as it's more important to have good connections. It's who you know in the aviation world that can land you really good opportunities. And that's one of the biggest hurdles I've found, is you really have to put a lot of time to get people to trust you and to know you, and try to make opportunities for you as a pilot, because it really comes down to you to make that happen.
It's definitely a high stakes industry to be in, not only just in the maintenance of the planes, the cost to put you into the education that you need to get you, all your, is it certificates? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, the licenses, the ratings and stuff. And that is a big hurdle too. The cost to get trained as a pilot, extremely high right now. But still, you have to, if you're going to invest all that time and money into learning to fly, you want to make sure that it's a point in your life where you're ready to make friendships, make relationships, make all that kind of stuff at the same time. Otherwise, it just goes past you, and you do all this training, and then you have no opportunity afterwards.
That's interesting. In an industry that's pretty very heavily regulated, how do you define making it? And I say that with quotation marks, but how do you define making it, and how do you feel you've reached that?
That's the thing, you never do. I've been flying small twin turboprop airplanes for quite a long time. And I still get asked all the time, like, why don't you go do something that is a little bit more like the next step? Fly a faster airplane, fly something that's bigger. And
you got asked that last night, actually.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. And I always come back to say, actually, I really love doing this, because it has certain things that I like the people that I get to fly. I have a responsibility to make sure that I can still be available to help these people fly, because the people that I'm flying around, they don't fly the airplanes themselves. So we have to either find some other pilots that can take over, but they, like I said too, it's all about trust. So these people that I fly, they trust me to show up, and I could find someone that has more experience, and they'd still show up, and I could say, hey, this guy's got twice the experience that I do. He's a way better pilot, and they would still look and say,
they don't know
okay,
him.
but
he's not you.
You're not Evan. So there is still to say you've made it in aviation, I think, is just finding something that you enjoy doing. Because there's pilots out there that don't enjoy their jobs at all. And it's like anything, like I think you just have to be happy with what you're doing and look forward to doing it. I look forward to flying all the time. And if I fly too much, then sometimes I'm like, I'd like to not be flying for a few days.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that happens, then I really look forward to flying. I think that kind of balance of wanting to do it and then sometimes being like, I've had enough of it for a little bit.
Running on that thought, how do you wind down from flying too much? You're in a position where if your clients basically say, hey, I want to fly, and if there's not somebody on hand, your hand is forced. So how do you wind down after a lot of flights?
For me, it's a work-life balance, and you see a lot of people online now talking about you just gotta slug it out.
Not even industry specific. It's
and I have to be honest. Like the type of flying that I do, sometimes it's very challenging. Sometimes there's lots of things you have to try to figure out logistically, and sometimes it's very relaxing and easy. Maybe you might fly just for 1.5 hours in a day, or sometimes it might be a lot more than that, and it might be several flights.
But there's preparation.
Yeah, it's all the preparation, and that's what takes a huge toll on, I think, doing on the life that I have, is that I'm the pilot, but I'm also booking people's rental cars, hotels, figuring out how I'm going to get home from these places that we fly and leave the airplane at, and make sure we comply with the regulations. There's maintenance, and people have requests. Someone shows up at the airplane with 500 pounds more than they're supposed to, and how do we do that? And crossing borders and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things you have to manage, and all at the same time, the people that own the airplanes, they want to do everything is within a reasonable cost. Right. So there's a whole bunch of things that can weigh a lot on you, and then you still have to fly at the end of the day and do it safely. So to wind down for me, I think is really the flying part. Like when the wheels leave the ground, it's like, like that's nice. Like that's where I'm happy. Yeah. And once you land and everything works out great, and sometimes it just comes down to the people that you fly. That might be a long day, and if they show some sort of appreciation that, he's a nice landing, you know what I mean? Or just little things like that. But also, it's doing stuff like this. Obviously, you and I have done a lot of fun adventures together, you, me, and my brother. And I think that's a big part of it, is actually having a little bit of work-life balance. And you have to really take time away from what you're doing in order to really appreciate that you have that job too. So I think that's a big part of it, is finding fun things to keep you looking forward to landing and not flying, and also looking forward to flying too, right? So I don't know, there's no magical formula. I'm a happy guy, like you're a happy guy, so whatever we're doing is working. And it may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think that's when you made it.
Okay. So finding that work-life balance and just coming to terms with where you're at and being present, just if you're in the clouds or if you're on the ground. Okay. So that kind of answers one of my questions of like, how do you stay grounded? But you definitely answered that. So complete change, not necessarily, but do you think everyone has a calling? Like, for as long as I've known you, aviation was your focus. I know we've had discussions outside of obviously this podcast, but do you believe everybody has a calling, or is finding a purpose more of creating opportunities for yourself?
It's funny because my opinion is that you can say you have a certain job or a certain career, you had a calling to that. But I think that sometimes I think of so many other things that I was potentially interested in as a kid that could have built up a passion for. You could have been a professional
hockey player.
Well, maybe I focused on that. I never played high level hockey, but maybe I could have focused on that, and maybe that would have been a bigger passion. It's like you with jiu-jitsu, right? Like, I think maybe if I was younger, if I wasn't in hockey and I started, everything could have been a potential calling for all of us to learn something new.
But you saw it and you ran it.
But aviation is I think it's just something that was lucky that I started doing, and that I just really liked, and I ended up liking it. And also learn to like it. So you train your mind you think of people that are really passionate about things that I have no interest in at all. And I think, why would someone want to do that? And then I forget. I'm like, there's a lot of people that'd be like, why would you ever want to fly an airplane? And there's people out there like that, and they have every right to do that, because I'm sure there's passions that they have that are completely opposite to what I'd be interested in. So I think people can have a calling, but a lot of it is just pure chance. You just don't know what you're really gonna love doing. It's like paddleboarding. That sport, I got into that about 4 years ago. Actually,
more than that.
We've done it a lot, and I know my brother has, definitely. And that's something that just happened, and now I love it, and I do a lot more of it than I ever did before.
So for those who don't see this too often, because you're in a colder climate like we are up here in Canada, Evan takes the opportunity to go paddleboarding nearly all year round. It's not uncommon to catch him or his brother on the river in the winter and a wetsuit or dry suits. I always mix it up, but yesterday, wouldn't say it was the warmest day at all, and he was out there on the water. So yeah, I guess you could have ran down a few different paths and chosen different opportunities. You're saying there's a potential to have a calling, but at the end of the day, you have to choose the path you go down and keep
I think you have to give certain things. Obviously, you don't have enough time in life to do everything out there, but sometimes I feel like you just got to roll the dice on something that you've maybe never done before, or that kind of piques your interest, and you never know, right? Here you've had lots of opportunities with different things, and now you're searching for something else. I think that's the greatest gift of life, is being able to choose and be able to do many different things. I always thought the best job that anybody has on planet Earth is, if you've seen the show Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs.
Oh yeah, Dirty Jobs. Yeah.
And you think like you're just doing all these horrible jobs, but he does them for one day. And I always thought that would be fascinating. I've always wondered what it'd be like to go.
Shout out to Mike.
To go shovel sewage out of or do all the dirty jobs that he does, but he only does it for one day. So everything is interesting, right? That he does. So that's what I think that's where a calling might come from. Is you have to explore all those ideas and maybe chase something down and see where it goes. It might end up nowhere, but you might end up loving it.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah, I like that. So what scares you most right now? Not in terms of flying, but maybe in your life or in your career. Some would say aviation's a pretty scary thing.
It's weird because I'm only 34.
Yeah.
You're 34. Right? Age is a weird thing. It's the first time ever in my life where I've thought about that in 6 years I'm going to be 40.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was like 18 thinking like, oh, I got lots of time, and I'd look at people that were flying into their 10, 15 years into their career already, thinking those are some old pilots. And I'm thinking like, now that's me.
You're on
Obviously,
2
there's a lot
decades.
older, more experienced people out there still, so there's still a lot of life left. But the scariest thing right now for me is just thinking about how fast time has gone. And sometimes I think about the things that I couldn't really do now that I wish I would have maybe started earlier. For me, it would have been making videos. That was something that just stumbled upon. I started making videos for the YouTube channel, and I wish I would have done that a lot earlier, but it was something I was actually really scared to just showcase and talk in front of a camera. And
What were you most scared about in regards to doing the videos? Was it how it was going to be received?
how people would, yes. And when you start making videos, you know, even like for this podcast, like you want everything to be perfect, especially when you make it and you're like, okay, and you nitpick all these little things that eventually you realize nobody really cares about. They just want to see you talk about, you know, airplanes. Like for me, it's videos. They want to see, they don't care about all the little mistakes that you make necessarily as far as editing videos go, about making sure everything looks awesome.
I've seen the level of detail you've put into editing videos, and I'm going to say we're generally going to be our biggest critics.
Yeah,
I think everybody
100%.
agrees with that. So
Yep, and I think that's the biggest crux of.
be kind, internet.
Yeah, be kind, but you know, I get a lot of criticism on my YouTube channel all the time from people and sometimes I'm like, you know, I realize things, I'm like, oh, you know what, that guy's absolutely right. And obviously there's a lot of mean things that people will say.
Yeah.
There's more support than mean things, but still, you know, you still have, I think that's what one thing I've really learned is that no matter what, if you want to do something with sharing, as far as say your experiences and all that kind of stuff with say aviation or the podcast or whatever your niche is, you just have to get stuff out there. You don't have to have the fancy camera. You don't have to have all the special equipment. You don't have to have a team of people. If you can just be authentic and just put yourself out there authentically, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned, and one of the biggest things I was scared of in starting a YouTube channel. So my fear was always like, oh, I started everything so much later than I could have, right?
Interesting. I appreciate that. I'll definitely say, though, that you mentioned authentically. For those who are going to go check out Evan's page afterwards, that's probably one area that I really value is he's done it authentically. 100% of your videos are your thoughts, how you felt, and just things like, even if you have a partnership, it's something that you believe in, which is awesome. And I think I've had a few life moments myself, and authenticity is probably the biggest compelling factor for how I look at things now. The fact that you're doing that and doing it publicly.
I can't. Yeah, I really agree with that, and it shows in. It's very easy to spot when someone isn't being authentic about something. I know for sure if I wasn't doing aviation videos, that would definitely show in the way I talk. It would show that it'd be something that I wasn't interested in.
Yeah.
It'd be very obvious, right?
Yeah.
It'd be like you with your businesses, right? Like if you're gonna go into something and you would have a good interpretation of this because you deal with so many different people all the time and people that are assembling things. You're one of the most connected people I know. And so you'd have a good idea of, okay, who am I gonna deal with that has your best interest and that really has a passion for what they're doing, or are they just trying to do it to make a quick buck? Yeah, and especially in the world that you're in, where you have to figure that out because you're investing money into something that you want to make sure that the people that are running it are authentic and that they're going to be there through the tough stuff.
Yeah.
But then also not bail when things are good and
or vice versa. Yeah.
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 So
they're yeah. Oh man, that's. Yeah, authenticity, and definitely there's a lot to unpack there, but I'll go off on a tangent if we go that way, but I appreciate
I know,
the
you've got
acknowledgement.
stories for days. Yeah.
I appreciate that. We got to leave little breadcrumbs so people tune back in for other discussions, and more guests I bring in, you'll probably get more of a story, and then based off of the feedback that we get from everybody, we might have different recaps of what I've done in my life too. But so, is there a moment in your journey that still haunts you about flying? That could be like scary stories about flying itself, like maybe talking about the directions you could have gone in life, and maybe if there is something like that and you're open to sharing it, how did you overcome it?
For me, the flying, I've had some scary moments flying, without a doubt, but flying happens so quick. Scary moments are usually you can figure out what went wrong and you'd be like, hey, I'm not going to do that again. I think it's more the decisions that you make in, this is very broad sense, but for me, it's always been decisions with people, with the relationships with the people that I'm flying. I was worried about how other people felt. And so my biggest concern was always, okay, are the people that I'm flying, are they happy? Did I handle this properly? Did I handle this properly? And I was very sensitive to that kind of stuff, which I wish I was a little bit more not as affected by that. But scary moments that I've had, I think we've all had things we've just worried about. I've worried about job security because the type of flying that I do, it's solely based on me having a relationship with the people that own the airplanes. And sometimes that can, there was one moment where I just got everything sorted out with an airplane, and then the owners came back and said, hey, and I was doing a lot of flying for them, and they said, well, actually, we're just going to sell this thing. Can you sell it right away for us? And I thought, oh, geez, like now I'm in charge of selling myself out of a job. And it was a very conflict of interest. I was like, okay, I want to help the owners, but at the same time, I was like, oh, geez, like, what am I going to do now? And so that was always a little bit scary. And then, of course, like we
did work that out in the end.
It did work out in the end, but it made me nervous. I was, now looking forward to the future, I think the scary thing for me is what's next, right?
Yeah.
It's scary because of there's the missed opportunity thing. I always think about, maybe I would have done this. And in aviation, there's lots of cool things you can do, but you have to pick something and stick with it for a while and maybe have enough time or have enough life in you to go do something else. And I think that's it. Flying is the scary moments in flying are short-lived. Yeah. And you can usually figure out what went wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fears for you is more...
It's more outside of flying.
Yeah.
It's the career,
External.
the decisions of, it's the relationships with people. And that's honestly the biggest part. I think that's probably with most people's lives.
So that's where most of your pressure kind of comes from is, okay.
Yeah.
I will say I have been, once again, lucky enough to see your relationships with your employers. And once again, you're authentic every single time. So that's likely where, I'm not an armchair shrink or anything like that, but I would imagine that's likely where you get a little worried. You're showing up, you're authentically yourself, and we always worry about, is that going to be received? Should I have done this a little more professionally? But I think where you have a strong suit is you are professional with kindness, humor. The same person that shows up sitting in this chair, so same person that shows up at a bar, maybe a little cruder sometimes, but totally. And then when you're in the pilot seat, same thing. Like you show up the same way every single time, happy, giving out hugs.
The biggest thing I've learned, because I've been yelled at by clients a couple times.
Oh yeah.
For mistakes I've made, nothing safety wise, but things when I was learning how to deal with different people and how to manage the airplane and stuff. And I think the biggest revelation I've ever had was when I try to think of like from other people's perspective, like when someone's mad about something, there's a reason why they're mad. Maybe it's usually just a misunderstanding between two people in their sides of things, right? So I always think if someone's really mad about something that I think is ridiculous, I have to think, okay, what have I been mad about? And did other people think that was ridiculous from my perspective? So at the end of the day, everybody is human. We all do the same things. We all really want the same things. Like we want to just have enough time to spend it with our friends and do stuff like this. And I think that actually is why flying to me it's a really professional thing, but it's also
it's personal too.
It's a very, and you have to really love doing it. Not for the money, but because you love airplanes, you love the people, and that I think is one of the things I've learned the most over the last couple decades of flying. It's just that there's lots of different personalities, but everybody at the end of the day, I think, wants the same thing. Yeah. And when you get people in the airplane, as soon as the airplane door closes, and you just start having non-professional banter with whoever's on the airplane, the jokes start flying, and 90% of them are very inappropriate and they should never leave the airplane. And that's really what brings people together. It's like when we travel and then you go and you hang out with the locals and all of a sudden you realize, wow,
they're just like everybody else.
They say all the horrible things that we joke about, and that's really what brings people together is the being be able to be vulnerable and poke fun. Like for sure I could make fun of you more than I would ever make fun of anybody else that I don't know because we're friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're a true friend because you can make fun of them and
They'll take it.
they'll take it and they'll know that it comes from the right place.
Do you have a favorite flight experience or a destination that stands out to you?
You know
as
what?
Particularly memorable.
I think there's been lots of very memorable flights, lots of cool places, but one of the most memorable ones that I always think about that was one of the most unique was actually you were on the plane, is when we flew when you gave us some work and we flew your boss out to Tofino on the west coast of Canada.
Incredible place. If you are listening in from abroad and you don't know what it is, Google it. It is a must-visit destination.
Definitely. And it was you, me, and then my brother Kale, and we decided to go while your client was, or who you're working for, while he was doing his own thing, we decided, you, me, and Kale, that we would just go do. We had a few days there to do whatever we wanted. And we didn't book hotels in advance, so we showed up and there was nothing to stay in, so we had to sleep on picnic tables. And it rains a lot in Tofino. And so we surfed and
There was a tent. You guys chose to sleep on the picnic.
We did bring a tent, but we had to buy everything in Tofino because there were no rooms, so we had nowhere to stay.
Yeah.
And
just FYI, the employer did offer us to stay with them at their family accommodations that they had. So it wasn't that we were hard up. We just chose this experience. We chose hard things at this point in time.
And it was a lot of fun. That was one of the most memorable trips, I think, because there were so many aspects to the like I said, it wasn't the flying. That was one of the best things. It wasn't the flying. The flying was fun, but not near as fun as once we got there and then everything fell apart.
Jeez. I remember the old Beaver water plane. That's
amazing. Right. We took a float plane and we went to some hot springs and there's lots of fun things about that trip in particular. So that one always stands out to me as something that I always remember.
I just had to ask because you at this point you have several thousands of flight hours, so I just had to ask, what part of your journey of becoming a pilot or even a musician or this kind of new chapter of a YouTube niche content creator do you think resonates the most with others, and why?
I think what I've noticed is, especially on the YouTube channel, is that there are lots of people that were there from the beginning and they comment as soon as a video pops up. They're on there. There's a few that are just like first because they want to be the first ones to comment on it. And I don't know them personally, but I recognize them.
Yeah.
And I think what brings people together on the channel is that they know that. I think one of the best things that you can do if you're starting a YouTube channel is have that common vulnerability. Hey, I'm just a pilot. All I try to portray myself in the videos is I'm just a pilot. I'm not special because I'm a pilot.
That's against what I'm trying to do with this whole podcast. You're not just a pilot.
Exactly, and I appreciate that. But honestly, that's I think a big part of it. They're like, okay, this guy's not an egotistical pilot guy flaunting
100% relatable.
Yeah, and I try to be, and I try to respond to all the comments that I can, and some of them were really long comments that are 5 paragraphs long because someone has even more aviation passion than me, and they decide to write. Sometimes they'll write whole stories about something completely related to the content that I put out, and they'll write this whole thing, and I feel like, oh, geez, this is long, but then I will sit there and I will read it and I'll respond.
But then you're like at the end of the day, you're almost like, wow, thank you so much for actually taking the time to have this. We forget, yes, it's virtual, but there was like an emotional exchange that happened there. Like they actually were just like, Evan Luft's content provoked something in me. Let's hit the keys.
Yeah. I think that's what kind of holds the channel together is that you have people that actually look forward to seeing more stuff. And that's something that was surprising to me. I didn't expect that. I thought in the world of online, like YouTube and that kind of stuff, that no one was really sitting there waiting for the next episode to come out, right? But it's funny, like when I was posting YouTube shorts, I'd get lots of comments from people saying, like, why aren't you making more longer videos? And it was funny. It was interesting to me because I didn't know people really liked my stuff that much. I thought it would just be more chance that if I make a new video, they'll probably see it and like it. not, hey, like, why aren't you making more videos? And I think that's what's surprising, and that's what even podcasts, because podcasts are so big now, I think that's probably one of the biggest drivers of why they're so huge now, is just because people want to see more. They see something that they can really learn something from, and now all of a sudden they don't want to miss anything after that, right? But yeah, I think that's what holds the channel together. People just really want to, they want to see you, and if you're that kind of authentic person that shares your passion, and they can see that you're passionate about it, then they know that what they're going to get is something honest, right?
They'll definitely keep you honest.
And I try to dramatize my videos a little bit, right? Because sometimes I'm like, how many landing and takeoff videos can one make without them all looking the same? So, and that's a little bit of the art of it, is sometimes try to make it a little bit, seem a little more dramatic rather than
You do have a great sense of humor online too. I remember, what was that? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember showing all the components of a plane, but
yeah, it made it very, it was just like a sexy airplane. It was for Valentine's Day.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing. But I like it. Once again, because I've known you for so long, and there's obviously a reason why you're my first guest on here. I've seen a lot of things. I really appreciate you as a person. And one thing that I've always enjoyed was the off chance that we ran into one of your fans. I forgot where we were, but there was a few people that wanted to get photos with you. Even just people that maybe weren't necessarily a fan initially, but they were so curious about what you're doing with planes. Like when we were at your local airport, you brought somebody over to tour around a plane. What has connecting with your followers and fans taught you about the impact of your work? I guess you kind of covered
I think that's
it.
It's the first time, if I go to airports, usually I shouldn't say usually, but a lot of times there'll be someone there that recognizes me from the videos. And I think that's
pretty cool.
And I've still got a small channel in the grand scheme of YouTube, but it's been enough in the aviation community that if I go to an airport and I'm not shocked if someone will say, "Hey, I've seen your videos before," and usually it's, "Oh yeah, cool, like man, thanks for watching," and then, "Do you want to check out the airplane?" and then we just talk about airplane stuff, and then usually if they're at the airport, they serve some sort of role at the airport. Maybe they're working there, and then they go back to work, and then maybe I'll see them next time I'm at that place.
Sometimes you even come back with cookies or treats from wherever you've been flying with thoughts of them.
Yeah, totally. And that's something too, is like in aviation is unique because I guess it'd be like the car world, but to a whole other level, because people that fly airplanes, especially big fancy airplanes, they're not really accessible to most people. So it's a lonely world. You think of like people that own their own private jets, that's why they're private jets, because it's just for them. Or it's a very kind of, it's too expensive for me. I couldn't rent a private jet. But the people that own and operate in the aviation world are very open to sharing that because they think it's cool. And so if anybody shows sort of interest in it, then usually they're willing to like you can go up to any airplane if there's a pilot there and say, "Hey, I'd love to go and see what it's like. Can I sit in the cockpit?" I guarantee you they will let you do that.
Amazing.
As long as you say,
respect.
"I'd like to show some sort of interest in what they're doing," because they think it's cool, and it'd be probably like car people, right?
Every person.
Yeah, every person. Yeah, if there's something they're interested in, and someone else shows interest in what they're doing, then they'll most likely share what they do. So
it's interesting because the industry that I came from, which is heavily in sales, we learned a lot from an icon named Brian Tracy, and he always talked about showing interest is the quickest way to build a relationship with somebody, but genuine interest is where it matters. So in my past life, I did six years of door-to-door sales. So I've spoken with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and the quickest way to break the ice and make it personal, like actually make you a human versus just this person at their doorstep that's trying to sell to them, was acknowledging something that they had in their house. And the amount of times that I went into a home and there was a similarity to my parents, like sewing, crafts, stuff like that, something that my mom would do, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, is that a Singer sewing machine?" And then just boom. That's for instant connection. So
that's actually a really cool piece of advice, because that's That's something that I think that there's little things like that where I'm like, oh man, I could incorporate that when I see people. I try to comment people on their physical traits, like, oh, you have lovely hair today. They get on the airplane kind of thing, and that kind of helps, right? Establish that. But that's actually great advice for people in sales. I've never heard someone say that. So
well, the quote that I was typing away because my recall, too many concussions, is a little slow, but the most interesting person in the room is the person who is most interested, right?
Yeah.
So
that is very true.
By you going up to these planes and basically saying, hey, wow, this is cool.
I don't think there's ever been a massive private jet that's so exclusive that I have not gotten on to get a tour of by just going and saying, oh, look at this thing. Can I take a look?
Why haven't we used the same level of excitement for the yachts when we're in special places?
See, honestly, it's probably the same thing. I've never really been on a yacht, so I don't have that experience.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Manifest that. I like it. Okay, so if someone told you that your story changed their life, which part of your journey would you hope that was in regards to?
I think it would be for kids. One of my favorite things is when there's young kids on the channel, especially because like I started flying or I was learning to fly when I was 14, and there's a lot younger kids now learning to fly. I think because they have access to so much technology on iPads and stuff, so they can actually, there's little simulators you can fly, and they're just exposed to the internet, so there's lots of good and bad things on there. Airplanes being hopefully a good thing, but so they can learn a lot younger age, and so that's cool. I really enjoyed that, especially when kids ask questions about anything with regards to how do I get started flying. Then I'm like, oh, that's easy. Like, you just got to go to the airport and you'll figure it out, right? I think that's the best.
You got a lot of guides out there too of how to get started.
Yeah, I made some videos on like how to get the first license towards becoming a commercial pilot and stuff. And that was eye-opening too, because there are lots of younger kids that watch that stuff, and they're either have aspirations to maybe get into flight training, which at that point is usually their parents are going to have to support that because it's expensive. And that's what's really interesting. Actually, when I think about it now, I think that's why I like that, because it's not so much like someone's passion for aviation. It's actually like a family decision. Yeah. Because a kid wants to learn to fly, it's going to cost them, the family, a lot of money. And sometimes like the reality of, I'm like, is it a career that maybe someone would want to get into? Knowing that, okay, yeah, sure, there's lots of job opportunity out there right now, but it's a very competitive space to be in. If you want to be a pilot, you have to have, like I said, the right connections. You have to have all the qualifications still. But I think that it being more of a family decision for young people learning to fly is what's interesting. So I've done some video calls, Zoom calls, whatever, with someone who was younger, and then their like parents were like sitting there like, we need advice on, our son wants to learn to fly, and they're writing down like how much like it costs and stuff, and this is real. Like, someone else might be making a decision based on what I put on the internet. And I've gotten lots of comments where people are like, hey man, like I've been following your channel for a while, and I did my first introductory flight, and I started up with my flying lessons. I'm like, hopefully like you like it, because I don't want you to spend all this money just because I posted something on the internet saying that being a pilot's fun. Yeah. So that's I think that weighs a lot.
I think that's really cool that you open the kimono for a part of the world that, maybe didn't have the opportunity to view what getting started looked like, and you can show it without them having to invest maybe all that money. You might have actually had a great impact on people that found other career paths, because they're like, okay, this isn't a path I can go down, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and actually that's crazy you mentioned that, because that's that's probably so true. Like I know that there are probably people that have looked at the videos and been like, yep, that's not for me.
But they probably still follow you, because there's some innate fascination with anything that flies.
Yeah.
I think that's
even
really
a frisbee.
Cool. Yeah. So we've definitely talked about I said the quotations of making it and stuff like that, and just having known you play with how you view your own success. And I do fully think that you have been successful in what you've done. There's always room to grow. And I think that's where you live, is you always want to get better. And I just admire that about you. How do you continue to keep yourself motivated and keep going to the next,
Honestly, it's talking with people like you. That's been one of the, because I think when you wanted to do this podcast, this was a kick in my pants to be like, okay, I can, if I want to continue making videos, like if I had the initiative, like some of the people that are doing stuff like this, or getting stuff like this going, maybe I would be a lot further ahead. Maybe I would be better at making content faster, and maybe I'd take that step, taking a little bit more risk and doing things that I'm maybe a little nervous to do. And that, I think that's what keeps me motivated. Is you gotta have some other people inputting ideas, or just to kick you in the pants and be like.
I think external forces are beneficial. I know a lot of people want to be like, hey, internally I manifested this all on my own and I'm doing this for me, but I think there's a lot of reasons why we are where we're at because of people that we surround ourselves with, whether that's our parents or something else that we follow. And I think that's powerful. I appreciate you saying this. I've had a lot of people externally motivate me, good, bad, mostly good, because I feel like I've gotten better, but thanks.
Yeah. No, it's true, because this is obviously the studio that I'm using that I use for my aviation
Yeah, we're going to
content.
start another company. It's going to be Studio B&B. So
rent this space out. We'll rent out the studio. But seeing this, and how you were setting this up, I was like, geez, like we did this in one day, and it took me more than a week to set up my aviation setup for this studio.
Well, and you had most of the stuff. I just repostured it.
Yeah, but that's what the motivating part was. It made me realize that I've been a little bit lazy, and if I really want to, grow the channel and reach new audiences and get content out faster, which has always been my goal. That was my goal. Then you really just have to do it, and that's one of the hardest things, is just getting started. I'll go through stints where I'll make 3 videos and be like, man, I'm on a roll, and then all of a sudden won't make videos for 2 days, and then that'll turn into 2 weeks. And then it's something like this that's just, oh, shoot, like, freaking, I'm getting like antsy. Okay, why don't I just turn the camera on and start doing it? And that's I think what motivates me to keep going. And where that leads, I have no idea. I'd like to reach 1 million subscribers one day, that's I'm 1/10 of the way there.
But you're 1/100th further than you were when you started.
That's on a pie chart. It's just a sliver.
Dude, you're still there. Like, that compounding effect is real, because you started with 0.
Right? Yeah, my first goal was to get a 10,000. When that happened, I was super excited. And then I realized...
And that was 1/10 of the way. Now you're 10x.
And you know what? Actually, talk about external factors. I want to win the little YouTube award. The smallest one you can get is 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And then YouTube will give you this petty, or I shouldn't say petty, but it's a good thing, because that's what motivated me to make more content and put more time into doing that. And so that external factor was like, oh, I don't know what it cost them to make it, $10. And so I was like, I would like to reach that goal. Because all of a sudden now it's, I look at it and I'm like, that's awesome. But now, and it seemed very...
You can't see his eyes right now, but he's definitely wandering to where the plaque is right now.
I look at it now, it's right over there. And I'm like, like, I like that. It's cool. It's a little achievement for me. And like I said, it's still a small channel, but it was a milestone for me. And I think what motivates me is still a lot of external things. People like you, like I said, like you doing this today was a kick in the pants for me. I realized, man, it's a lot easier if you just start.
That's it. So we've asked a lot of questions. I'm going to do some kind of general quick fire just to keep it within an appropriate time frame for a podcast. I'm not no Joe Rogan. You don't want to sit with me for 2.5, 3 hours. But okay.
I beg to differ.
Number 1, quick fire question. If your younger self could see you now, what would they be most surprised by?
If a younger, you know what?
Your younger self, yeah.
My younger self would be surprised that I am still flying the same airplanes that I was 12 years ago.
Incredible.
It would be, wow, like you haven't, I had, my younger self would probably be surprised, slightly disappointed, but then also, oh, I didn't know that, wait, you did that instead?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
My younger self definitely wanted to fly other airplanes, but I love this flying now.
So that kind of flows into my next thing a little bit, but if you weren't a pilot, where do you think life would have taken you?
I would have been a train conductor. I love
Trains, planes, and automobiles.
trains were one of my favorite things.
Okay.
And before that,
Stay tuned for part 2.
yeah. Trains were the biggest thing. I always wanted to drive a train.
That's amazing.
I've never driven a train, but
Okay, maybe I can arrange that for you. I definitely have connections there. So, okay.
Yeah.
What do you want people to remember most about your story?
I think it would be the flying, but also I just want people to, what I try to convey in my videos and my flying is that just a really nice guy. Really nice, and I've always tried to make sure that I'm the first person to be like, oh, I'll get that for you.
This guy holds a door open longer than any other Canadian, and we're already notorious around the world for holding the doors for an extensively long period of time.
I owed you for dinner last time, and you fought me for the bill, and you won. So now I'm even more in debt. And for you to do that
There's no
to
such
me, see, the problem is,
You snooze, you lose.
yeah, you're with good people when they fight you to pay the bill. Like they fight you.
To many more, buddy.
And then they're sneaking dollar bills in your pockets so that you.
Yeah, it's hard to do
So
a
that they
whole
feel,
roll of loonies.
so that they
and
feel
pennies.
even, yeah.
Okay, last question. What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of, I think in my entire life, like I've had some achievements and what I think is success. It's maybe not comparable to what most people think success is, but I think I'm proud of, I think I'm most proud of being able to have a lot of patience with people. So I like it when someone comes to me because they want to, because I'm a comfortable person for them to be vulnerable to. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually one of the things I'm most proud of because I know a lot of people that aren't like that. And so I have a lot of friends that I know would come to me first just to talk about things. And I always thought that would be the same with the people that I'm flying around, and maybe it isn't, but they're a lot more resilient, I feel, than me. But I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of is like that I've been able to learn to just listen to people. And even if it's something that I completely disagree with, to just not let it necessarily bother me or make me feel like I have to, fight them for just because of a difference in opinion necessarily. Mm-hmm. And I think just being able to somehow appeal as the guy that people can like open up to. That's always been a thing I've been proud of. Has nothing to do with flying, has nothing to do with
That's fine.
anything else that I've done. I think that's just one of the things that I actually look forward to that.
That's amazing.
Like when they say, I want to talk about this. I'm like, yeah, let's do that.
Well, buddy, Evan, I just want to say, I want to give you some recognition. Thank you so much for taking the first gamble at this.
It's not a gamble.
I appreciate that. It's because you know me. But when it comes to friendships, I definitely appreciate your authenticity in terms of kindness. I've witnessed it firsthand. I've seen it. Just people on the streets to our friends, your family, your association to your clients, all those sort of things. I commend you for that. That's in such public times, I think we need more of this. We need more people that are their true selves, that show up, that yes, we understand not everybody can pursue their passions, but you're passionate about everything you pursue.
Totally. Yeah.
And I really appreciate that about
Thanks,
you.
man. It goes both ways. So I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me on the podcast. For those of you who maybe missed the intro for some reason, hopefully you weren't trying to find a different video, but.
There we go. If you made it all the way to the end, tell your friends.
Not so average.
Yeah. Tell your friends, shoot us a message. We'll be quick to respond. We love to grow this channel, and we want to really just redefine what is success and then just reevaluating what is average. We often look at ourselves in the harshest lenses. And when you sit down and we have conversations like this, you start to realize, holy, there's a lot about me that makes me above average.
What gets me excited about your podcast is that Alistair's one of the most well-connected people that I know, because he's done lots of different businesses. And one of the coolest things is that everywhere we go, he always runs into people or knows people that he's either worked with or made acquaintances with. And so that's what gets me excited about the podcast, because I'm like, man, Alistair's probably got hundreds of people that he could bring on this show or on this podcast that would be really useful for anybody out there that's in all sorts of different types of fields of work and even just self-improvement, right? Yeah, so that's what gets me excited, because I know that if anybody's going to have a chance at making this happen, it's going to be you.
So that's the plug. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, don't forget to subscribe, everybody. Put it in,
we'll put the details in, and you can find Evan Luft on his channels. Adios.
Yes.
See ya.
Bye-bye.